back to Trust in the Chaos. My name's Therese Hartz, aka The Chaos. So, this video is something that kind of came to be as a follow up to last week's video, as well as something that I've always kind of thought about. Today, we're going to talk about crying. I know. What are you doing? So, the reason why this all kind of got spurred in the first place is if you watch my last video, Trust in the Chaos, Loss of a Friend, you will have seen that I was going to a wedding of a once very dear friend, and we had kind of drifted apart, and it was really hard not being an active part in the day and kind of just sitting on the sidelines and being a guest. And I knew it was going to be tricky going in. I knew it was going to not be the most fun I've ever had at a wedding, but I sat there and contemplated and prayed for a long time and decided, you know what, you need to go, you need to support this friend. It's not your day, it is hers, and you need to go be in her corner, even though you may not be thrilled at where your relationship is at. So I did. And ever since then, I've really been debating whether or not that was a good decision or not. Because, you guys, it was awful. It was really bad. I openly cried a lot. Like an embarrassing amount. Like, I feel ashamed by my behavior. And part of me wishes and thinks that maybe you were just overreacting. But part of me tried so hard and prayed so hard to pull it together. And I asked my good friends to pray for me this whole day, and it didn't happen. The wedding itself was beautiful. The bride looked amazing. So did the groom. They were very much in love. Everything was great. Food was awesome. Mass music was incredible. Holy smokes. It was an extremely beautiful wedding. I have nothing bad to say about the event at all, except how it felt for me. I didn't want to kind of lose it in front of the bride, so I decided to kind of play in the background and let her approach me and just pray for the strength that when she did that I'd be okay. So I talked to her about 3 times over the course of the evening. The first time was, oh, you look beautiful, how you feeling? You look great. You guys are so happy. You know, the typical wedding pleasantries. Okay, go. We'll talk later. Because I didn't want to, as the bride, if you've ever been married, your entire day is just people who want to talk to you, and I didn't want to keep her. I also didn't want to, break down in front of her. It was her day, and I wasn't about to do that to her. Second time I talked to her, she was talking to other people, actually, and I noticed her adjusting her hair, and the theater nerd in me and the former soft tech hair makeup guru immediately launched into action. I found, spare bobby pin on, the head table and just grabbed it and started, shoving stuff into her hair. And she's in the middle of talking to other people. She's like, thank you. And I'm like, you're good, go, have fun. And then one other time I really tried. And I just hugged her far too long and lost it, saying that I loved her and that I was really happy for her, which is the truth. But I couldn't get over the feeling, and I talked to my mom about it as we were sitting next to each other at this wedding, that this is probably the last time I'm going to see her. I talked to her. And as you saw in that video, it's easy to know in your head that, this is obviously for the betterment, and I know that putting myself through this is unkind to myself, and that expecting a type of friendship that she can't provide is not fair to her either. But it's a totally different thing when you're essentially at a funeral of your friendship, and it was awful. So I tried to be as nice as I could, but the family, whom, again, I was very close to, basically raised with, knew things weren't okay. They could look at me and tell. And for the most part, they were really nice about it. I didn't want to be that person, though, on the wedding day to, make it all about me. when their loving, caring family member was getting married. So I did my best to, not cry in front of people. There were quite a few times that I went outside, had a quick cry against the wall, came back in about a minute later, just get it out and try to go back in. Um, After a while, though, it wasn't fooling anybody, and my husband was like, "We need to go." And I'm like, "Give me a half an hour to turn this around. Let me really try." And he's like, "Well, then you got to go up to her." And that's when I full blown cried in front of her, and it was ugly. And then I ended up crying in front of her mom, and I wasn't about to yell to mother the bride because that's just not what you do. And at that moment, it was time to go. I felt really stupid and weak and worthless and like a freaking drama queen. And just awful and embarrassed, and it was her day. How dare I be such a bother, essentially. And it was really bad. And we got in the car. I had a headache from probably a combo of the champagne and the crying, and just full blown like passed out in the car ride home. My husband was a freaking rock star. So many pep talks, so much love and support. I couldn't have done it without him. I didn't even get a photo with the bride. She didn't ask. I didn't want to start crying. I think if she would have asked, I would have been okay. I would have been like, yeah, she does care, but like she didn't ask. And I'm sure, again, nothing malicious. It's your wedding day. You're distracted. You're doing 47,000 things. I get it. But I cried a lot. I cried that morning when I woke up. I cried like 5 times during the wedding. I cried yesterday. I'm trying to cry right now. Trying not to cry right now. And I know you guys have seen me cry in these videos a lot, but that's not really something I do. So for me to cry this much is pretty rare. Usually I have to really force it out. Like I know I need a good cry, but like I can't do it. I think the last time I cried this much is I just was mentally and emotionally exhausted about like a year ago. And I ended up just like blasting John Mayer in the shower and just like letting her rip. But for this is really weird and awkward and awful. So throughout the course of this, I tried to be nice to myself because at the end of the day, it's you and your body and God, and I knew I'd given it up as much as I could, but I realized my humanity was my humanity and gotten in the way, and I felt weak and stupid. But then I was looking through my photos on my phone, and for those of you who don't follow the Trust in the Chaos Instagram, I try to post at least a few times a week. And there's one that I've been waiting on posting, one of the photos on the Instagram, and it's Jesus Wept, John 11:35. But waking up the next morning at 6 a.m., unable to sleep, just going over and over and over what had happened the day before, I decided to really pray on it. So for those of you who don't know what that line is, let me give you a quick overview. So Lazarus was a good friend of Jesus. He was described as a disciple. He had 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And essentially, Jesus and Lazarus were good friends. They weren't like the apostles type, but they were pretty close. I'm going to take little bits and pieces from John 11. So I'm going to start at John 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, a village of Mary and her sister. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And I think that's the one you love. I always think that's really beautiful phrasing. When he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, that the God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. And so when he heard Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, yet you're going back? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daylight will not stumble, for they see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. After this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples only thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I am not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Then Thomas said to the rest, let us also go, that we may die with him. So put yourself in the shoes of the apostles for a second. They know this guy is dead, and I'm assuming if Lazarus is friends with Jesus, and they were also pretty good friends with Lazarus as well, and they were probably pretty upset about this death and didn't understand what he meant, saying that it was for glory. But anyways, on his arrival, Jesus found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard Jesus was coming, she went out to him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe you are the Messiah and the Son of God. Here's where we start to get into the quote that I'm striking for. After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary said this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said to him, see how he loved him. The story goes on, for those of you who don't know, of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead to natural life. And immediately after this, the plot to kill Jesus becomes rather thick. And Jesus dies pretty quickly after this. This is the 7th of the 7 signs of Jesus before he ends up dying for our sins. But I want to kind of recap that entire story. So Jesus knows his friend is sick. Says, let's wait a little bit before we go. He knows this guy has died and is trying to tell his friends who are also mourning. He goes finally to the family and says, hey, I love your brother. And they're like, he wouldn't have died if you were here. And he's like, I got this. See, even Jesus knew what he was about to do. The disciples didn't, Mary and Martha didn't. But Jesus knew that he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead into new life. Not even in a spiritual way, which we all hope to attain through heaven, but physically and quite literally. Jesus knew what was about to happen. And again, it says this. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was truly moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. See, Jesus knew that everything was going to be okay. He knew these people were going to be over the moon. He was so excited that he was going to be able to perform this miracle and install some faith in these people. He knew that everything was going to be okay. But he still cried. Now, for those of us just who hate crying, it feels like a sign of weakness or worthlessness, especially for those of us who suffer from a mental illness. Crying is unfortunately part of the gig. And most of the time you feel really dumb and overdramatic for doing it. Trust me, I get it. I'm trying to form a new relationship with crying, especially after this verse, in which, again, Jesus knew everything was going to be okay, but he was still moved and troubled and cried anyways. Our Lord of all hope and all salvation cried. If he cried, so can I. He knew everything was about to pay. He was literally about to fix the entire kit and caboodle. And cried anyways. Jesus gets it. God gets it. Now, in any circumstance that is troubling and we have sorrow, we don't know what's going to happen. We know it'll be okay, but we don't know the if or the how or the when. God knew all those answers with raising Lazarus, and he still cried. So if God can cry because, he's upset, we can too. I think it's really cool that God, through John, put this verse in the Bible, because while the Bible is so full of hope, there's a lot of despair. Especially in our life, there's so many things to be grateful for. Something that I'm trying to really be grateful for in the past few days is that, I have this beautiful new life. I have a house and a husband and great friends, and I'm working with kids, which is what I've always wanted to do. But the shedding of that old life is really hard, especially the parts of it that were good, especially because a lot of my old life, I was surrounded by all these incredible Catholic people that ended up doing a lot of hurt, and trying to reconcile the two of how that could happen. I'm really happy now, and I have no Catholic friends in terms of those people I can run the race with. But I look back in my past life, and I want that person to run the race with, and they want nothing to do with me. And it makes me think, am I not good enough? Did I screw up along the way? Is it the fact that I've got pink hair and tattoos? Is it the fact that I have a mental illness? Is it the fact that I'm too hard to handle? Am I not Catholic enough? Am I not good enough? And these are the things that bring me to tears. And I just gotta hope and pray that I'm doing something right, because it feels like I am, even though there are moments of doubt. And in those doubt comes tears. God didn't doubt himself for a second and still cried. People around him cried. It's okay to cry. It's better to do it. Just from a physiological standpoint, bottling it up only leads to more anxiety, more paranoia, headaches, puffy eyes, you look gross. You might as well just get it done and over with. God's not going to think any less of you. He, if anything, is my guess, will be proud of you for embracing where you're at. Because if I've learned anything from this story in my 26 years of just being on this planet and trying to be a disciple, is that no matter how far you've strayed, God wants to be there for you, no matter where you're at. And as long as you keep striving and keep trying and listening, that's all he really wants. And it's going to suck along the way. God promised me a life of suffering when I was 17, and he's pretty been on the nose, but I know that this suffering means something. And it really sucks, especially when you don't feel like things are going that way and this channel doesn't have as much traction. I just want it to help someone and to feel like I'm not alone either. I want someone to run the race with. But all I can do is keep hoping and praying. And quite honestly, crying out to God. Physically, spiritually, mentally. Because only when you cry will God make things beautiful. As stolen from a Les Miserables quote, and rain will make the flowers grow. So, it's okay to cry, guys. I actually recommend you cry. Of course, follow me, DM me at Trust in the Chaos on Instagram. I'm just going to keep rambling about things going on in my life unless y'all suggest other stuff. Please feel free to follow me there, connect with me there. I'll help you run the race if you're looking for someone to run it with you. Signing out, Trees Hearts, Trust in the Chaos. See you later.